Hello and welcome. I'm joined yet again by POX POPULI, and today we're going to talk about the NGOs, how they affect society, and we're also going to talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So POX, you're very welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me on again.
Okay, so yesterday I saw a video on Twitter. It was a woman, she was very smartly dressed, and she was talking about an organization called USAID and all the different things they had sponsored with Americans' tax dollars. I saw something about they produced a play in Ireland, I think a drama or something. They helped a comic, was it an LGBT comic or a trans comic in Peru? It was just a really crazy list. What was your impression of that, Pox?
Yeah, so pardon me if I feel a bit pleased with myself, because I'm enjoying the pleasure of being vindicated in my time. There's a funny Christopher Hitchens quote where he's asked, what are the great pleasures in life? And he immediately responds, well, one of them is being vindicated in your time. And of course, for a bellicose, argumentative chap like him, he would say something like that. And, our last conversation was about the American empire, its nefarious influence, the American question, which is essentially, is America friend or foe? And, I've been banging on about this for years and years and years. And when I would say that America is the epicenter, it is the source of so much evil, I would get pushback. I would get people denying it, or I'd get whataboutery. Even if lately there's been this term called the GEA, the Global American Empire, and Americans would even get upset at those of us who use this term, because they would say, no, don't use that. That makes it sound like America's at fault. Call it what it really is. Call it ZOG, Zionist occupied government. Trying to shuffle off blame onto small hat wearers. But that's not accurate. It is the global American empire. You have to shoulder some of the blame for this, and you have to wake up to the reality of what America is and what it has been doing for decades. So you mentioned this organization called USAID. It's actually not aid. It's USAID. It stands for the United States Agency for International Development. It's not an aid agency, but they very cleverly put aid in the acronym so that it looks like an aid NGO or an aid organization. Because who could be against spending millions of dollars, sending agents all over the world in the name of helping people? Who could possibly be against that? And in fact, we've seen in the wake of the shuttering or defunding of this organization, many people are saying that, like, this is horrible, this is cruel. Trump and Musk are shutting off this aid program. How heartless. But it's not an aid program. So what they've been doing, this organization, has basically just been funding, backing, promoting, and then even coercing countries all over the world into implementing diversity policies, LGBT policies, all of the things that people like you and I have been combating in our small ways for years. So you mentioned what the USAID was doing in Ireland. This was a $40,000 investment. How do you feel about this investment betwixt in your country?
Yeah, I don't feel very proud of it, to be honest.
You don't feel enriched?
Proud of it. It doesn't make me feel very Irish.
So what they did, it was $40,000 to promote DEI in Ireland, and the channel, the vector for this promotion of DEI was a play. Well, this is just the one that was pointed out. You mentioned the video. I think that's the new press secretary for the Trump administration, this blonde woman who was giving the details of these USAID adventures. I don't know her name. Haven't really cared to look that up, but in any event, it was a musical that was televised nationally to celebrate Ireland's independence. Okay, so keep that in mind, the humiliation, the insult, because the play, the event, this televised event focused on blacks. So you had that insufferable female rapper who I think is from Zambia originally, but you know, it forces you to think of her and call her just as Irish as yourself. Denise Chaila, I don't know how her name is pronounced. Anyway, she was there with her poetry, her slam poetry. There was another black musician. In tribute to Sinead O'Connor, a black musician, you know, performing as an Irish interloper. There was parts of this quote unquote play that confronted Irish racism and prejudice. Again, this is to mark Ireland's independence. This was supposed to be celebrating Ireland's independence. And this is what the United States Agency for International Development paid for, put on. It's this American organization's money that made this possible. That's just one example. That's the example in Ireland. Another expenditure, another endeavor of this organization, to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars, was to promote diversity, equality, and inclusion in Serbia. In the workplaces of Serbia. Then it was also promoting or paying for and promoting another sort of play, or like using theater, stage theater, to promote like transgender equality in Colombia. It's crazy. I mean, I could go on. Well, I'll leave it there for now because there's some other ones that we can get to. But yeah, basically, this organization has its fingers in so many pies, and it works to promote subversion. It works to subvert the national identity and character of a nation state. It works to promote damaging and harmful ideologies that, again, also serve to tear apart society. It serves to destabilize governments. There's been also examples of this organization under the guise of international development, planting its agents in foreign governments with the aim of destabilizing and then ultimately toppling those governments. Now, it all gets a bit subjective and relative. Perhaps there are some governments that should be toppled, that should be destabilized. But who is America to play God like this? And they never think of the consequences, as we've seen time and time again. The Americans never think of the consequences of destabilizing or toppling a government. They just topple it, and then all hell breaks loose, and see you later. Enjoy your democracy. Say thank you. We're all supposed to be grateful for this. That's one thing that's really been frustrating to see is people are saying, "Oh well, be grateful it's stopped now. Thank goodness, thank Donald Trump. It's stopped now." Well, I'm sorry, no, you don't get a thank you. You pumped toxic waste into our homes for decades. You don't get a thank you. You don't get a pat on the back for finally turning off the hose. You know, Donald Trump and the magatards are talking about how some other countries have treated America badly. The EU has treated America badly. Trump called it an atrocity, the way the EU's been treating America, basically just because the EU doesn't buy American cars and buy America farm product, for good reason, by the way. But when are we going to start talking about how America's been treating other countries? We should be talking about punishment for America for decades and decades of subverting and pausing up other countries. Let's have that conversation. You don't get a thank you.
It sounds nice, POX, DEI, and it's said with such a soft voice: diversity, equity, inclusion. And a lot of people wouldn't be able to read between the lines. They wouldn't realize what it amounts to. And when it talks about inclusion, it's exclusion for people like us. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will be able to relate. For example, when they applied for a certain job, due to the color of their skin, they wouldn't have been able to get the job. Maybe they applied for a grant, they couldn't get the grant based on the color of their skin. Maybe they entered a competition, they had no chance in the competition because the guidelines specified that, you know, people like that, it was for everyone except white people, for example. Maybe school places for their children, etc., etc., etc. Now, you spoke there about, in Ireland, this play that was sponsored by American taxpayers. And I remember about 8 years ago, there was a play in Ireland, and they had I think he was Nigerian. He was playing Cuchulainn, the ancient Celtic warrior.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yep.
Yeah, and you had all these, we call it D4. These are very affluent people, Irish people from a certain part of Dublin. And they were all standing, they gave it a standing ovation, you know, they were clapping like seals. This is so wonderful, this is so progressive. We've pushed through the barrier here, guys. And, you know, and for everyone else, it was just a right slap in the face. You're destroying our sense of our identity and our history. But these checks that are sent off to sponsor things like this, they work. They do work. For example, the whole trans agenda, when I was growing up, I didn't know a single trans person. Now, with the young demographics, it seems to be quite common. And for me, this is a sterilization program. This is a sterilization program.
Oh yeah. How many young European boys now have, you know, chopped off their penises? How many young European girls have been butchered because a US government agency siphoning American taxpayers' dollars was going around the world promoting this and funding it and backing it and basically willing it to be? Again, we should be thinking in terms of, instead of, you know, being on the back foot and defending ourselves and saying, oh, look, Donald Trump, sorry, we'll behave. Oh, please don't put on tariffs. We'll buy your American cars. We'll let Monsanto come in and funk up all of our food. No. We should be on the front foot. You, America, Trump administration, you might have, like I just said, you might have turned off the hose, but you have been pumping toxic waste into our homes. We are going to talk about what you owe us now. Because my children were subjected to and endangered by the filth that you in your empire have been promoting. And it's such an insult even to call it the American empire. This is an empire that is literally fake and gay. They haven't conquered any countries. They haven't achieved an empire through military prowess or diplomatic genius. This is an empire built on usury, finance, financial manipulation, and subversion, and cloak and dagger. And of course it is, because who controls this empire? So of course it takes on these characteristics.
You hear of cases now, you'll ask someone about a kid, that maybe you knew years ago, and you'll say, oh, how's Michael? And the person will say, oh, Michael goes by Michelle these days, and she's living in Galway, or she's living in Cork. Jesus. And I find it frightening that people will even change their language. And this is not a natural occurrence. This is backed up by high finance, a lot of marketing.
Well, that's the prescient point. That's such a good question to raise, because there's a lot of debate amongst the theorists, the big brains who get on social media and YouTube and Substack and Twitter to give their hot takes and show how clever they are. And there's been a long running debate. Is this emergent behavior, or is this top-down social engineering? By emergent behavior, we mean that the people themselves are doing this. They are longing for, embracing, creating, social phenomena like mass immigration, multiracial, multicultural societies, transgenderism, gay marriage, pedophilia accepting. And then the other side of that is that, no, this is top-down social engineering. This is not emergent behavior. This is not the will of the people wanting this. It's being imposed on them, and they're being manipulated through sophisticated propaganda into wanting it, into thinking that it's good for them, and into thinking that it's their idea in the first place. And I think now we're seeing the proof that it is top-down social engineering. And you know that it is, and I always took that position anyway, because all you had to do was ask someone, if mass immigration didn't exist, would you come up with it? Ask an Irishman. If mass immigration into Ireland and turning Ireland into just another multiracial, multicultural economic zone wasn't already happening, so it didn't exist, it's not a thing that you can be in favor of or agree with, would you have come up with it yourself? One day, would you have decided, would you have had this thought of your own, I think there needs to be more Nigerians in Ireland. I think we need to have more gay pride parades in Ireland. I think we need to have sex education for toddlers in Irish schools. Would you have come up with that? And the vast majority, even the Irish libtard, would probably say, no, actually, I would not have had those thoughts. I would not have had that idea. And so, yes, you will get the Irish libtard giving a standing ovation to a black man performing as Setanta. You will get Irish libtards, or just all over the country, all over Europe, all over America, Australia, Canada. You will get these people applauding, embracing, promoting drag queen story time, diversity, etc., etc. But they're not the ones coming up with this. At least not the ones that are employed by these NGOs or that work for these government agencies. They are simply embracing and celebrating and applauding what is coming from on high. And in some cases, the way these people treat the government, especially when their team is in power, it really is like God. It really is coming down from on high. And so I think that there you go. We're seeing the proof that all of this has been social engineering, which is in a way a silver lining. Because yes, the damage is incalculable, and yes, some of the damage is irreversible, irreparable. But we were right. None of it is normal. It's not happening naturally. It's not happening organically. There are powerful agencies with limitless funding, limitless coffers, spread out all over the world, creating this. We were right. And so if it's unnatural, if it's being created by these agencies with these unlimited funds, there are names and faces doing this to us. Well, they can be stopped. And so far, it remains to be seen how permanent these decisions by Trump will be. I've seen it reported, I've seen it said that Trump's shutting down or turning off the funding to USAID is temporary. And in any event, they're just executive orders, so they can be undone by the next president. If the next president is a Democrat, for example, they can just rev up the engine once again and get these programs all back on their feet, and it'll be like nothing ever happened. But for the moment, the good thing is at least we are seeing it now. It's all over. It's all over social media. It's all over the news. What these NGOs and what this organization in particular have been doing. So we can feel vindicated. Again, like I said at the beginning, we are vindicated in our time. None of this was natural. None of this was normal. It was all being promoted by people with names and faces, working for organizations with names. They can all be identified, and they can all be stopped.
It's a sad state of affairs when, in order for a politician to gain votes, he need merely say the following: there are only two genders. And suddenly, wow, my God, this guy, he gets it. He gets it. He's great. We'll vote for him. And that shows you how bad things are, that someone just, saying water is wet gets, lots of applause and all the rest of it. So we're in a very bad way, and it's because of these organizations. Another thing I want to say, and I'm not sure about this, but I remember reading an article a few years ago, and it was about gay conversion therapy. So the idea that if someone who's homosexual, maybe they want to be heterosexual. And I think it was outlawed in a number of states in America. I could be wrong. But if that is the case, then it's a one-way street. And they want this. The people up there in their ivory towers, they want this. They want deracinated people. They want people who perhaps will no longer want to reproduce. Maybe in the future, the organization can take care of that. But yeah, I'll get on to something else, POX. And just before I do so, I'll just say that, you have a lot of celebrities now who are, DEI themselves, and they're a little bit frightened that all this woke is being put away. And they're starting to say DEI is a blessing, it's wonderful. And obviously they have to do that because that's how they pay the bills. That's how they've got into those positions. But I want to talk to you about this helicopter crash in DC. So a helicopter reportedly crashed into a plane. And I saw on Twitter, I saw people putting up a clip of it. It was a very grainy image. And immediately I saw people asking questions, was a DEI person flying this helicopter? And I thought that's very, very interesting. When there's a calamity like this, people will immediately start saying, Was the person unqualified? Was the person put there due to them being a female, or due to them being a person of color, or due to their whatever sexual preferences? And the news then comes out that there was a very young woman in the helicopter. Now, before we hit the record there, you informed me, Pox, that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the woman, the 28-year-old woman, I believe she was a lesbian, she was actually flying the helicopter at the time. Is that correct?
I don't actually know for sure. I think so. What I do know is that, yes, you're right. There was speculation. There was people saying it was a transgender woman pilot, so not a real woman, but it would still be a DEI higher. I suppose that would be, definitely if you get a transgender woman pilot, that's all of it. That's the D, E, and I, isn't it? But then it turns out it's a real woman, or it was a real woman, and she seemed to be also a political activist. She seemed to be a very liberal, progressive activist. So there's pictures of her waving rainbow flags, and she was also apparently adjacent to activism for the Biden administration. So then people were wondering, well, did she lose her mind and just attack Trump's America now? Was she upset at the Trump takeover, the fascist takeover America, that she lost her nerve and just committed an act of suicide, taking other people with her? I don't know. Or was it a skill issue, and she simply was not a very good pilot and should never have been in the position of flying a Black Hawk helicopter? It all still remains to be seen. There is a reason to believe, though, that there's not just one incident. This has been one of the worst aviation disasters in American history in recent years, simply by the sheer number of people who died. But there have been all sorts of near misses. So air travel has got safer, actually, over the years. There's fewer and fewer accidents, but there's more and more near misses, and in the United States in particular. And I think that 2024 or 2023 had a record high number of near misses. And when I say near misses, I'm talking about planes nearly colliding, planes having a rough landing, part of a plane malfunctioning in mid-flight, landing gear not working correctly, and the pilot has to make some heroic maneuver to set the bird down safely. Things like this. And so there's been a record number of these near misses or incidents, not accidents, just little incidents that could have been an accident, could have caused a disaster in the United States. And then, lo and behold, the FAA, Federal Aviation Agency, or something like that, had been implementing policies to employ quite literally the worst imaginable people you could employ in the aviation industry. Not just transgender, not just minorities, literally like mentally ill dwarfs. Okay, that was one of the protected groups that was given preferential employment opportunity. People with schizophrenia and dwarfism. This is absurd. And again, it comes down to social engineering. These are top-down decisions, but you have to wonder, like, who is so ideologically possessed, so zealous for these kinds of DEI policies that they would put so many lives in danger in the name of hiring schizophrenic dwarves to be air traffic controllers. But then you remember, though, that these people won. Like I was saying in our last conversation, these people won many years ago. They set this world up. This is their doing. And now they're just rubbing our noses in it. They are humiliating us. I truly believe that for some of these people, they know what they're doing is dangerous and will have dangerous consequences, disastrous consequences. They know that it will hurt people like you and I. It will demoralize us. It's an insult to us. It's humiliating for us. They know all this. That's why they're doing it. They want to put our lives in danger. They want to demoralize us. They want to humiliate us. That's the point. They're relishing in their victory. Because I don't know how else you can explain hiring one of the most, it's one of the most important jobs, an air traffic controller. It's stressful. You have to be aware and alert at all times. You have to know exactly what you're doing. It's stressful to be a pilot. It can be, at least. You do these long haul flights. And the aviation industry in the United States was selecting the worst possible people to do these jobs. And then you get even to the level of building the planes. Boeing hiring all these incompetent, low IQ diversity hires. And what do we see? Doors flying off Boeing planes. Bolts improperly fastened. Shoddy work everywhere. So after so many examples of this, and we hear warnings coming from whistleblowers, 2 Boeing whistleblowers died within a short span of each other. One was found dead in his truck as he was about to testify against Boeing. And that's another form of psychological torture and manipulation, is that we'll get the news reports, we'll be told, the public will be told about the Boeing whistleblower who was set to testify and reveal all of the dangerous and retarded practices and policies at Boeing that are putting so many lives at risk. And we get the report, we get the news headline of him being found dead in his truck days before testifying. But there's never any consequences. We never find out, well, who did that? It's obviously not suicide. Why would he kill himself just days before testifying? This is obvious. It's an obvious mafia-like hit job. Is anyone going to investigate? Is anyone going to be held accountable? Or are we just going to let these criminal CEOs, NGOs, diversity zealots continue ruining our lives and truly dismantling piece by piece first world civilization?
You spoke there, POX, about the humiliation ritual. And if anyone has traveled in European airports of late, it's quite probable that you've had your bags checked by foreigners. You've had foreigners going through your bags in security. Perhaps you've had foreigners looking at your passport. And it's really horrible when you're in your own country and you're being scrutinized by someone who can barely speak your language. And someone who has no real right to be, never mind in your country, but certainly not in that position of power, wielding that power over you. Getting back to this helicopter crash or whatever with the plane, I saw people saying online that, her name wasn't released for quite a while. And they said that in the meantime, a lot of her social media was memory hold. And you do wonder as well, they're trying to prop up, if you're trying to prop up people who are not competent enough for their jobs, or maybe they've been pushed up the rung because, they did a Monica Lewinsky, God only knows. But the fact that the social media, it just shows you how things, information can quickly disappear as well. I did see a photo of this female pilot, and she's standing with a bunch of people, and they've got this massive rainbow flag. So I think it's not.
Yeah.
It's not a terrible question. It's not a terrible question if you do ask, was she one of those people who was very frustrated that Trump had got into power, and, in her adult brain decided to just end it all for not just her, but everyone else. Like, I'm not saying that happened, but these are
right. Neither am I. It's just
should be
speculation.
Because it's speculation. Exactly.
There's a very there was video footage from various CCTV cameras and mobile phones and things like that, home doorbell camera, things like that. But there's one video that is actually very high resolution, and it was obtained by CNN, which just means someone gave it to them. But it's very high resolution, and you can actually see the crash take place, and the helicopter seems to make a beeline for the plane. It makes no sense. There's no reason for that crash to happen. The helicopter goes directly for the plane. It's eerie. It's very eerie.
Yeah, I read a report that whoever was flying the plane, whether it be the lesbian or not, they asked air traffic control if, I forget the term they used, but more or less, could they move the helicopter out of the way themselves instead of depending on the positioning that traffic control would give them, something like this. They decided, and they were saying that they believed there was a plane behind them, and they were trying to get away from the plane behind them or something. But I have also seen that better video, and it does look like it goes, like it's as straight as an arrow. It just goes straight towards the plane. So, right, POX, we'll sum this up by just, obviously we've laid out some ideas here, but what would be, if this continues, and it looks like it might be on hiatus for a while, the DEI. I don't think it's going to stop completely. Like it's embedded into our societies now. But if it continues unabated, how do you see things faring in the West in the next decade or 20 years?
Well, it's funny that you use the word the West. Whenever I write, I often put the West in quotation marks, because the West is really, it doesn't exist. It's a creation of the Anglosphere after 1945 to sustain the Cold War. It goes back to what we were talking about in our last conversation, which I do recommend people listen to. Is Italy the West? Is Greece the West? Is Germany the West? Is Hungary the West? All these countries, Italy and Germany in particular, were beaten into submission and then taken under liberal America's wing to become a part of the West. But it was all just posturing of the Cold War. The West was Western Europe and then Britain and the United States, and the East was the Soviet Union and China. But I don't think that paradigm is going to last much longer. And I agree with someone like Alain de Benoit, the French philosopher, who also has been uncomfortable with calling himself a Westerner or using this term, the West. He says, I'm a Frenchman. I'm French. And, France, until the Second World War, had a different destiny and was doing it something different. It has a very different history as well, for good or ill. You can look in France's history and see lots of very bad turns that are in a way still influencing us today negatively. But anyway, that wasn't quite where the question was going. I just picked up on that, this thing of the West. We live in so many different matrices and paradigms that I just think it's always important to actually pause and ask, what is actually going on? What do these terms mean? What do they refer to in real life, in reality? And I honestly think that woke is not really being put away. Or even if it is, that doesn't mean that it has stopped existing. If you fold your T-shirts and put them away in the drawer, they don't stop existing. Those T-shirts are still there, and you can pull them out of that drawer anytime you want. So even if the term, they're putting woke away, well, is that good? Shouldn't it be that we should be killing woke? We should make woke the way that fascism in Italy is. It's proscribed by the Constitution. You can't have a fascist organization in Italy. It's illegal. That ideology is illegal. You cannot manifest it in reality. That's how liberalism and woke should be. That's, when people say, well, we're winning, I'll declare victory, or I'll declare winning when I see planes full of people being deported. Hey, by the way, isn't it interesting that the televised deportations in America have suddenly stopped? They were around for a few days. We had a few funny memes, video clips of migrants being deported, but now the televised deportations have stopped. I hope that they're still continuing, but the spectacle stopped. The puppy brain of the people has been distracted by something else, and the media is giving us something else to distract us. Isn't that another interesting form of manipulation? How we're always being manipulated. We're always being psychologically tortured, manipulated, distracted. But anyway, victory will be when we see, mass deportations, not just of illegals or failed asylum seekers, but of people who are even here legally, but there's just too many of them, and they are corrupting the fabric of our nations. And winning will be when these NGOs are shut down completely, and the people who founded them, operate them, are on trial, in prison, expelled from the country, because many of them are foreign. There's an NGO. It's called the Immigration Advice Service, and it's not American, it's British. It was founded in 1989 by a man named Ajit Singh Rai, an Indian. And it is involved in getting Nigerians citizenship in Ireland. I mean, it's a massive global network of horrible people, enemies everywhere. And so it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be, just as easy as an executive order cutting their funding. They need to be shut down and imprisoned or deported, exiled. Their ideologies need to be proscribed. And as I said already, the damaging effects, the damage that these NGOs and these hiring practices and these zealots have wrought will be long lasting. The children with their libtard parents who were psychologically manipulated through social engineering to put their children on hormone blockers. Those are permanent damaging effects. You can turn off the funding to that LGBT organization, but they've already damaged your child. I mean, there was another example of in Poland. There were these pro-LGBT, human rights, diversity organizations in Poland. Again, it's just interesting to see how many of them exist in socially conservative and demographically healthy Eastern and sort of Central European countries. You know, we all know that they exist in the West, but they were festering even in places like Poland. DEI hiring practices being funded by USAID in Serbia. And these organizations are saying, oh, you know, because of Trump's funding cuts, now we are going to struggle to operate. You know, these Polish NGOs promoting diversity, anti-racism, LGBT acceptance, all that sort of thing. So their activity might be thwarted temporarily, hopefully long term, but they've already done so much damage. And so I still think that the fight is definitely not over. In fact, I would say the fight is actually finally just getting started. We're just starting to fight back. And be careful. Beware of who's fighting on our side or claiming to be fighting on our side. I don't trust Musk. I don't trust Donald Trump. And we in Europe especially, shouldn't want or hope for Americans to save us. We know what that looks like when Americans, quote unquote, save us. Not only just because of the fact that these are perhaps just temporary measures or easily undoable executive orders, or it's just cutting funding, but you know, these organizations are still around. But also, I don't think that Trump and Musk are really going all in on, quote unquote, putting the woke away. I still see plenty of examples of the woke being just as powerful as ever. And the younger generations are very woke. And they're going to be moving into positions of power. They're going to be the people, you know, they're going to be getting older and taking over companies and hiring people and starting their own companies, becoming the CEOs. And statistics show that every passing generation gets more and more liberal. And yes, there is a gender divide. You know, Gen Z males are more conservative or more right-wing than Gen Z females. But overall, Gen Z is trending liberal. We're always being pulled to the left. So much work is still to do. Also, you know, don't rush into things. Trump's been in office for what, a week and a half, 2 weeks, and just by, you know, some televised deportations, sending some troops to the border, cutting off the funding for some NGOs, all that looks really good and that's positive. There's some other things that we should be worried about, you know, with his partnerships with Larry Ellison and Sam Altman. I mean, basically Trump is bringing in the new world order, the techocracy with these cancer curing vaccines and massive surveillance state, Palantir, all this stuff. So again, you know, be careful. You've ordered a package from Amazon, but it's coming with a lot of other stuff that you might not have ordered. And so because of all the good stuff, though, the deportations and the ending the funding for these NGOs, a bunch of people are now volunteering for the military again. Like, after all the work that people like me have done trying to wake up white men and get them to realize that this thing called the United States is not your friend. Don't shed your blood for it. Don't fight for its wars, which are really wars for Israel or wars for the oligarchy, the bankers. Larry Fink, that's who you're fighting for. Well, recruitment, volunteering in the United States military has surged, and it's now 36,000 new volunteers in just it's being projected for the month of February. So I guess looks like dying for Israel is back on the menu, boys. And this is what happens when you engage in irresponsible and exaggerated magatard propaganda. So this is why I challenge it and I go hard on this American question. Because unfortunately, and it's not a unique thing about the Americans, you can say this about other people. COVID certainly showed this, that it's not a unique thing. It's it seems to be human nature, but people are easily manipulated. They're easily manipulated by memes and vibes, by propaganda, but one thing that is special about America is that they are just constantly bombarded with this American jingoism, American exceptionalism. Even the American liberals believe that America is the greatest country ever, trademark, copyright. And so it's very easy to get Americans back in line, get white Americans back in line, volunteering for the military, pumping their chest, breaking up the American flags. And it seems like all criticism of the American empire has been forgotten. Even people who are on the so-called dissident right and used to criticize the American empire, in the days of the alt-right and things like that. Well, now they're flag-waving cheerleaders for Trump's American empire, because you just change the person in the White House and everything is fine suddenly. And another thing is that Americans are kind of a mercenary people. The Germans noted this when they were fighting the Americans. The Germans felt like they were fighting for their country. They were fighting for their folk and their folk tied to their land, whereas the Americans were just mercenaries fighting for a paycheck. That's kind of true to this day. So there's a lot to be vigilant about. And I don't think we're out of the woods at all just yet.
You do wonder how many planes, how many crashed planes, how many deaths society will accept before it starts to reevaluate the whole DEI system. And I guess when DEI starts bringing down certain control structures, that's when the government has to adapt, because it wants to keep that control structure in place. You notice as well that when something like this happens, and I'm not saying it's the case of the Black Hawk helicopter, I don't know enough about it, but even when, and we know it when some absolute lunatic, some animal goes on the rampage, similar to that guy in England, the Welsh choir boy, he's there because of diversity and inclusion. He's in the country because of diversity and inclusion. And the media will present him as a child, even though in reality he's an adult. He's an adult. He's probably 6 foot something and he's going around with a machete, but they won't present that photo. They'll present him as an angelic child with glasses, this type of thing. So they're trying to sweep the inconveniences under the carpet. But eventually we run out of carpet. We run out of carpet, and it's there for everyone to see. I've noticed in the last 12 months, I don't see as many rainbow flags around. Now, I'm not saying, I'm not celebrating, wonderful, that's great, but I did notice it, that there were less and less rainbow flags around, and especially where you have, government institutions and all that. I noticed there were less and less of them.
See,
And
this is what I'm
now
saying
I
is
barely
that
ever see one.
it's
Yeah, go ahead,
very
Fox.
it's very subjective. It depends where you are. Where people say, "Oh, the woke is being put away," or like I'm seeing fewer rainbow flags. I mean, I think it depends on where you are. For example, in Italy, while a rightist, supposedly nationalist government is in charge, the city of Rome, which is leftist controlled, because again, remember, a country can have a national government that's right wing, but there's still going to be leftist strongholds in especially in urban areas. But anyway, in Rome, the metro lines, the underground trains, were painted in the rainbow and trans flag, not just for Pride Month, but like for the entire year. Pride year, they're painted these colors. A few of not all of them, but just like a special train on the Rome metro has been painted in the trans rainbow flag. And also still in Rome, the city hall has decided to tear down all references to Italy's colonial exploits in Africa. So streets named after Italy's former colonies like Eritrea or Libya, you'd be called Via Eritrea. Well, now that reference to Eritrea is being changed. That name is being changed. The street signs being taken down. Streets that were named after Italian generals who fought in Africa and led the military expeditions into Africa. Their names are being taken down. The streets named after them are being taken down. Their statues are being taken down. So for me, woke is alive and well in Rome, in Italy's capital. So again, it's nowhere near. Like I said, we're just starting to fight back.
Yeah, and another thing, Pox, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there are people who are making a fortune out of bringing in millions of third worlders. And
it's an industry. It's a big business.
Yeah, it's people trafficking, and they make more money from moving people around than drugs. And that sounds...
It's especially that way in Ireland too. Your country has been a phenomenal example of how this is a business. The hoteliers, the hotel owners, the people working in the hospitality industry who are selling their people out, selling out their fellow Irishmen for for money, because they can turn their hotel into a refugee center and get a government contract, get a big government payday. And where's the government getting all that money? Maybe the government is able to offer such a handsome payment because they're getting money from USAID. So you have a great example of how what I call big immigration, the immigration industry. We have big pharma, big tech, big oil, big immigration. I think people should start using that term. Ireland just presents a phenomenal example of how it works. In Italy, just yesterday, the treasurer of Salerno was arrested. He's a member of the PD of Italy's top leftist party, and he's been arrested. He's now under house arrest because he was caught money laundering, and his operation involved selling fraudulent residency and work permits to illegal migrants in Italy. It's a racket. It's a mafia. It's a business.
seems to be another problem too, Pox, and that is that a lot of people, they seem to respect the filthy rich. They don't analyze them. They don't analyze how they've accumulated such wealth. They just think because they're stinking rich, they must be wonderful people, and we should respect them. And I think there's a little bit of that at play in a country like Ireland, where you have people clocking up hundreds of millions of euros by bringing in military-aged men into towns and villages, remote towns, remote villages all over Ireland. And these people are still able to walk the streets. They're able to go into the local coffee shop, sit down with a bun and a cup of tea, and read the newspaper in peace. And I don't understand it. I don't understand why people just immediately presume because you're rich, uber rich, you're a wonderful individual. So I think there needs to be a reevaluation of.
Well, I mean, just even the fact that we have an expression like "follow the money" goes to show how superficial and material our culture has become. It's all about money. And only a culture that is completely captured by the merchant caste could be like this. Because if you look back through history, and going quite far back, to ancient history, primordial history, when civilization is guided and governed by the nobility, by the warrior caste, by the priestly caste, money is not the end all and the be all. But this goes back to ancient Greek times, the cycle of history, the ages of history. It's also seen in the Vedic culture. We have things like the Kali Yuga, and again, the cycle of civilization. It's sort of like the meme, the hard men make good times make weak men make hard times, blah, blah, blah. So going very far back into thousands and thousands of years ago, men understood that civilizations go through cycles. And the golden age is when a sort of noble warrior caste guides and governs society. And then that usually passes in peacetime to a priestly caste, and the society becomes a bit more spiritual. And they pursue instead of pursuing territory or dominance, now they pursue philosophy and knowledge, wisdom. And it's the priests who guide and govern society. And then that degenerates, and through the degeneracy, the merchant caste rises up and takes dominion over civilization. And they ultimately are the ones who lead to its ruin. They're the lowest of the low. When you reach the cycle wherein the merchant caste is in control, that's the end stage of your civilization, of the cycle. And that's clearly where we've been for a long time now. And these cycles last centuries. You have to take a very long view of history to see how these cycles play out, which is why it's so fascinating that ancient Greek historians and philosophers were coming up with these, were writing down these theories of history. What were they looking at as examples? What was ancient history to an ancient Greek? It's interesting to think in those terms. The world is a very old place, and it's full of history and mystery. But yeah, we are in a time where money just means everything. Again, in ancient times, even into medieval times, money has always been important. Wealth has always been important. If you read the Bible, for example, it's incredible to see how, for those desert dwellers, if you had lots of cattle and women in your harem, the more oxen and sheep and goats and women you had, the more powerful you were. That's material wealth. So this stuff has always mattered, but there were also times when the leader of the tribe, the leader of the nation, or the leaders were selected, or they became leaders themselves, they proclaim themselves leaders through their strength of arms, through their nobility of character, through their devotion and love and sacrifice for their people, which made the people love them. Whereas now we have, like you said, the people who control society, guide society, govern society, and are admired by society are just the rich, just those with a lot of money. You know, is Elon Musk really someone of a noble character? Is he a strong man with a strong love for his people? Who are his people anyway? Who does he care about? Just himself and his companies? A lot remains to be seen. But he's in the position he's in with such influence and power because he's got a lot of money. But does he deserve all that power? Has he earned it like a Viking chieftain who earned it by bravely exploring new territory and defending his tribe from invading tribes, fighting with his own hands, his own battle axe in hand? Or is he just a merchant? Stuff to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's a frightening scenario to think that, you know, one of these merchants in today's world could buy and sell several countries at the breakfast table, or change the policy, change the policy overnight.
Well,
Just
we've been controlled by the merchants for such a long time. That's what the colonial era was. You know, for all of its positives, you know, I certainly think that, especially positives for these people in Africa, in India, there was certainly many positives to being under European rule. But then we have other examples where colonial rule was not good for the native people, and not even good for the colonial powers themselves. You know, the British ruling class benefited from the empire, but the average British person, you know, English peasant, factory worker, did they really benefit from the empire? Or were they just as exploited by the empire as the subjects abroad? But in any case, the colonial era was merchants, rich European merchants, some of them actually Jewish, you know, Rothschilds, for example, bankers, sitting at the breakfast table and carving up Africa. That's a leftist, progressive, anti-European talking point, but they are right. That is what France and Italy and Britain and Belgium, that's what they did, you know. And there's good things about that era and bad things, and in some ways we're living through the consequences of the bad things. But really, we should just assert ourselves and not apologize, and then also just say, look, you want independence, take responsibility for your countries, stop coming back to our countries. You have so much example to go by. We left you our constitutions, we left you the railroads, the hospitals, the medicine, the technology. It's your fault for not maintaining it. We showed you how. So I don't want to, you know, be making apologies for African shitholes and saying that it's the Europeans' fault. But it's funny that you said, you know, these people can sit at the breakfast table and buy and sell countries. That's not a metaphor. They actually have been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, and they even have more power now. That's the thing. They have more power now with technology and that. POX, we'll leave it there. I will drop links to your Substack and Twitter in the description. I'll also drop in an essay I wrote back in 2023 called The Standard of No Standards. It relates somewhat to what we've discussed. So POX, I leave you with the final word, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you as well. I think I said all that needs to be said. Yeah, I recommend people do follow me on Twitter. I've been posting a lot about this lately. I've been also reposting, resharing people who've been doing some good work on this as well. These NGOs have names. The people who founded them have names. And they can be turned off. They can be stopped. You know, we're not there are some nebulous things out there that seems like we're just fighting. We're fighting in the ether, and certainly ideas are in the ether, and morale is not a quantifiable physical thing, but there are things that are actually real. There are real people, real institutions with names and addresses and bank accounts. We can fight these people. And I think a lot of filth is being exposed lately, and I hope it continues. But I do want to repeat, you don't get a thank you for finally turning off the toxic waste that you've been pumping into our homes. What you should, this is what I'm saying to the Americans who are saying, who've been saying that we should be thanking them. No, you should be apologizing and now helping us. You want unity? You want to say we're all in this fight together? Okay, act like it. Let's take on these institutions, these NGOs. Let's put them away permanently. But don't ask me to give you a thank you after you've been poisoning my body and soul for years and years. So that's where I would leave it for now.